Tall, physical, and strong-arm quarterbacks, coveted, of course, by coaches, especially at the prep level. And the duo at number 4 on the MT Top 40, that's exactly what you got. From Great Falls CMR back in the 1970s, up to close to present day over at Kalispell Flathead. The number 4 quarterbacks, modern era, and the pre-1980s are Kalispell Flathead's Brock Osweiler and John Leister of Great Falls CMR.
I coached Brock for really through the middle school years. You know, started working with him as he was in 6th grade. I mean, he was already 6'7" when he was like in middle school, and he would come work out with our guys, and most people, if you didn't know, would come and think he was already our high school starter. He was just, man, he was a good player. So I got to work with him as a freshman and a sophomore at Flathead before I came up here, and obviously he stayed there. And that was tough, but Brock, you know, definitely. I mean, he has to go down on that list as one of the greatest players all time, and what he's done and still playing in the NFL.
Standing 6'7", Osweiler's stature an added advantage, of course, against Montana prep competition. That came in football and basketball, where he was 4 times All-State on the hardwood and actually gave a verbal commitment to Gonzaga for hoops during his sophomore year. Averaged a double-double, but the quarterback decided to test his college football options and eventually committed to Arizona State after his junior year. As a senior, Osweiler named Montana's Gatorade Football Player of the Year, 2,703 passing yards and 20 touchdowns, while adding 700 yards and 13 scores on the ground.
I saw him throw a corner route at about 45 yards on a dime, and I was like, wow, that kid's a sophomore. And the spring of his sophomore year, he had already committed to Gonzaga at that time for basketball, and he came up to me and said, hey, Coach, I was thinking about maybe sending out some video to a few schools. What do you think? And that was really the day I knew he would end up in football, because I knew the kind of interest that an athletic 6'7", 6'8" kid would generate. And there's not many kids from Montana that can say, hey, you think I should send one out to Florida State, Alabama, Washington and Arizona State and those kinds of places, and you say, yeah, that's a good idea. On my whiteboard in my classroom, I had phone numbers of coaches that he needed to get a hold of or that were calling me, and it was long. A lot of big-time schools, obviously. Arizona State had the connections from Montana with both Lubick and Dennis Erickson, and so they were they did a great job recruiting him.
What was fun is he always had the physical tools, and he threw it so naturally. I never had to make many adjustments. It was mostly just teaching him the drops and the footwork that go with the various throws that you have to make, but he already had all of the physical tangibles. So really it was watching him, and I didn't get to be a part of this, unfortunately, but watching him develop as a leader. And you could see that as a junior and a senior in high school, but then when we went to Arizona State and then into the NFL, just watching him grow as a leader, and you hear comments about that and the type of leader he is, and that was fun to watch. Unfortunately for me, it had to be from afar, but yeah, definitely.
As a freshman at ASU in 2009, he appeared in 6 games, started 1, threw for 249 yards and a pair of touchdowns. A year later, once again 6 games and 1 start, 797 yards and 5 passing touchdowns, and the breakout year came as the full-time starter in 2011. 4,036 passing yards and 26 touchdowns, also rushed for 3 scores, and led ASU to a bowl game where they fell to Boise State in 2011. Denver Broncos would select Osweiler in the 2nd round of the 2012 draft, number 57 overall. He, of course, backing up Peyton Manning. Osweiler played sparingly the first 3 years, but eventually replaced Manning, injured midway through that 2015 season, and won his first 3 starts. That included on his 25th birthday, the first start, 2 touchdowns there in a win over the Chicago Bears, then 270 yards and a touchdown in a 30-24 overtime game against the previously unbeaten New England Patriots.
I'll give you one of my proudest moments as a coach. So the night that Brock was on Monday Night Football playing against the Patriots and led them to that comeback victory in the snow for Denver in their Super Bowl year. So I split screen my TV because another one of my all-time favorite quarterbacks that I coach, Mike Riley, is playing in the CFL Grey Cup and winning the MVP and leading them to the championship. So I am sitting there by myself, the most proud moment maybe I've ever had, watching Brock Osweiler on half the screen and Mike Riley on the other half of the screen, and just almost surreal going, I coach both these guys. Both these guys from Montana are playing at the highest level and winning incredible games. So it just gives me chills to think about that I've been a part of those guys' lives and helping them develop.
All in all, that season, Osweiler would start 7 games, 1,967 passing yards, and 10 touchdowns. Also added a rushing score. Broncos went 4-2 with Manning returning in that 7th game. Denver, of course, won the Super Bowl that year, 24-10 against the Carolina Panthers.
Well, it was really in 2 parts. Number one, physically, he just didn't look like anybody else, but his preparation was great, and his knowledge and his want to be great. He definitely wanted to be great. He didn't really talk about the NFL, but you knew it, and you definitely knew he wanted to be a big-time Division I quarterback, and he had the tools to do it.
In March 2016, Osweiler signed a 4-year, $72 million deal with the Houston Texans and threw for 2,957 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 16 interceptions. Also led Houston to an AFC wildcard win against the Oakland Raiders, but was traded to the Cleveland Browns in 2017, released in September, went back to the Denver Broncos that fall before signing with the Miami Dolphins this past spring. Brock Osweiler's career numbers: 584 completions, 31 touchdowns, and 27 interceptions. Also 4 rushing touchdowns and a 13-12 record as a starting quarterback. Back in time to the 1970s, John Leister, the son of an Army colonel, moved to Great Falls from Texas and became an all-state quarterback under Jack Johnson and CMR. Led the Rustlers to the 1978 Class AA state championship. It was a 13-7 loss against Helena Capital, who happened to be quarterbacked by Bobby Petrino. Leister drafted in the 20th round of the '79 amateur draft by the New York Mets, but decided to continue his football career, doing so at Michigan State. Completed 1 pass, a 21-yard touchdown during the 1979 season, and then became a 3-year starter for the Spartans. Sophomore year, 103 of 247, 1,559 yards and 10 touchdowns. 2-time captain, he would throw for nearly 2,500 yards and 9 scores in his final 2 seasons. You can actually still find his name in the Michigan State record book. 10th in career pass attempts at 686. 11th in completions with 313. His 3,999 passing yards ranked 12th, and he's tied for 11th with passing touchdowns of 20. Also, his 35 career interceptions tied for the 2nd most in program history. Leister again selected in the amateur draft, 6th round by the Oakland Athletics after a senior year of college, but again decided to go with the football route, signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers in 1983, but they had a guy by the name of Terry Bradshaw, so Leister was cut at the end of training camp, latched on with the Michigan Panthers in the United States Football League, eventually leaving that team for the Boston Red Sox, who took him in the 3rd round of the 1984 draft. Leister spent 5 seasons in the minors, 2 more in the majors, 6 starts, 8 appearances, a career record of 0-2, but had 19 strikeouts.
John Leister was a great athlete, you know, and we lose the state championship to Capital that year in a heck of a snowstorm. Bobby Petrino was their quarterback, and then John, he was recruited by a lot of schools in baseball as well, but he chose Michigan State, and he went there and was a 3-year starter, 2-time captain. They weren't real good when he was there, and then he signed with the Steelers, a free agent, went with them, and then they had their old starter there back, you know, and I said, don't unpack your bags. And so he went to the Michigan Panthers a while, and then he signed with the Red Sox. He was drafted in the 3rd round by the Red Sox. Unbelievable talent.
He then entered the coaching world, and in 1994 was an assistant football and baseball coach at Alma College in Alma, Michigan. 3 years later, he was their head baseball coach, led them to the 1999 MIAA championship, and also became their director of athletics from 2007 to 2014. Came back to Montana December of 2017 to apply for the head football vacancy at MSU Northern. That, of course, went to Andrew Rowland later in the month. Leister right now the assistant head coach, the offensive coordinator, and the quarterbacks coach at Lindenwood University, Belleville.
He loved to play football. Football was his love, and he was talented. He had a strong arm, very strong arm, and he had huge hands. He could go up, palm 2 basketballs and dunk 2 basketballs at the same time. Huge hands, and just a very gifted athlete.
So there you go, another 2 for at number 4. Brock Osweiler, Kalispell, Flathead, still in the National Football League, and John Leister's route went from football to pro baseball. You can read more about him at montanasports.com. Richie Melby, MTN Sports.